there are pessimists and dynamists in the world, and dynamists, really the optimists of the world, are the ones that forge ahead and can figure out where the opportunities are and make them happen. So if you look around the world today, you'll see that East Asia is galloping ahead, and there's been great progress over the last 60, 70 years, which 70 years ago no one would have predicted. In Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Taiwan, and South Korea, you see the living standards that have risen dramatically. You see some similar progress, although a bit slower, and they're not quite to that level yet in China and in India. China and India probably have the greatest potential to affect the world economy in a positive way and to affect the people on the ground in China and India in a positive way through increased incomes, increased living standards. So there's great potential around the world for, I would say, more prosperity that will lift up the lives of individuals who need help. And so I think that's incredibly important to remember. There are challenges. When you look at British Columbia, for example, the land claims question has bedeviled the province for 20 years now at least. And there are some challenges from some of the court judgments that will make it difficult to do a deal, but not impossible. So if you look ahead, though, you'll find that there are 600 resource projects on the book across the country worth about $650 billion. Each one of these resource projects has at least one First Nation nearby. And what that means is that at present, some of the most marginalized people in Canadian society, Aboriginals on reserve, have the potential to earn a better income, to have a better life, if some of these resource projects go forward. And so I think there's going to be a great incentive to push through some of these projects, which are going to benefit every Canadian, but especially benefit directly those on reserves that are near some of the resource proposals, whether it's a mine in Ontario, or whether it's natural gas in British Columbia or an oil well in Saskatchewan. It's going to depend on the particular First Nation leader. It's going to depend on the particular activist. Some people will never be convinced. They have a very, I think, romantic view of history and human life in the past, which was actually pretty nasty, brutish, and short until the last 2 centuries. So I think most people, though, are reasonable. Most First Nations leaders are reasonable. Most Aboriginal people I know would prefer to have a job rather than not. So I think you just have to lay out the possibilities and the opportunities. I mean, if you're a young Aboriginal in northern British Columbia near a proposed mine or a proposed energy development, and you'd like to stay in the area, you're only going to be able to stay in the area in any degree of comfort if you're able to participate in that prosperity. In other words, you're able to get a job with that particular mine, you're actually able to work as an engineer with the oil company, or provide some service to that company. And I think that's going to be a growing attraction for everyone across the country. But again, in high unemployment areas, whether it's Atlantic Canada or whether it's on an Aboriginal reserve, there's a compelling argument to be made that some of these resource projects should go forward. As a born and bred British Columbian, I mean, I get that sometimes we're only going to look out for what matters to us right now, right here. But of course, let's be realistic. So far as I know, you can't replace oil and gas with solar and wind yet. It's not going to keep you warm when it's minus 40, that's for sure, in northern BC. It's not even going to heat your condo in Vancouver. So everybody's going to need some oil and gas for the future. They're going to need some minerals to come out of the mines to build their bicycle. And so it's important to be realistic about these things. And the anti-everything folk who think bike parts come from, I don't know, come from Mountain Equipment Co-op but don't come from the mine originally. How's that work? It doesn't work too well. So I think one simply has to point out the facts, and hopefully that will convince the majority of the population anyway to I think recognize what's always been British Columbia's history. British Columbia has always prospered when it's made stuff and when it's dug stuff out of the ground. I mean, for sure, I mean, we should look towards, future industries as well, or existing industries that can be expanded, the high-tech sector, environmental services. I mean, I think British Columbia could profit massively from selling environmental services to East Asia, for example, which has a tremendous problem with pollution. So there's all sorts of opportunities. The question is, can we get past the anti-everything folks who won't even allow the technologies to be developed because somehow they think they can go back to some pre-modern way of life that really, kept lifespans pretty short and pretty miserable if you go back any time before the 1800s.